Hey everybody, today the topic of discussion is someone told me they wanted me to talk about ancient Rome. So I guess we can talk about ancient Rome. Rome was pretty cool. It was a pretty cool place. Had a lot going on, and it is very influential in today's world. Like a lot of the first things that existed back then are now existing now, and America is very imitative of Rome, both its rise and fall, so to speak. Now, Rome was the first ones to build interstate type travel and all kinds of other stuff that they did. They were the first ones to have schools, like colleges type schools, educate the people, create a central one language, one try to have one centralized language that was the majority. They also started off as like a city, and then they expanded and got bigger and bigger. They had the biggest everything. They had the biggest military. They had the biggest everything. Um, they conquered the known world at the time. Um, they had great military leaders that were like Caesars. They were kind of like presidents for life, so to speak. But they also had a senate. They had because Rome was, it was like sort of kind of like a type of republic, but only the rich, elite, and powerful who owned stuff could do that. The Romans owned slaves. They had gladiator bouts, uh, and they had a religion which was Greek mythology, I guess, or Roman mythology, um, where they worshipped the gods, and they kind of believed in the presidency or the Caesar. Kind of believed they were children of the gods, so to speak. So they believed that they had the divine right of kings, um, so to speak. Caesars weren't always necessarily appointed. They were kind of appointed, but they came from the elite ruling class or the military class, which you had to work from way low to way high. So to become a citizen, you had to either be part of the rich, elite, powerful class that owned land and you inherited it uh, at birth, basically, or you had to start off in the military and work your way up to like a great general or something, so that you could then be given land and become a prefect, like a prefect governor of some sorts, like a prefect governor, which then made you a member of the government, which gave you power within the government to vote and stuff of that nature. Rome didn't always win, but for the majority, they eventually conquered the majority of the known world, which is Europe. Went into Africa a little bit, so they were surrounded by the seas, the Mediterranean, those seas, right? That are over there by Europe and Africa. Middle East was conquered a little bit. I believe the Roman Empire, to at portions, had stretched not where they owned, but where they had diplomatic and commerce type relations all the way to the Far East and India, China, and that nature. Uh, because, and we do know that there is a possibility that the Romans were one of the groups that also found Native Americans in America, in the Americas, because we have found in archaeological digs and whatnot, they have found Roman coins from boats and different things that may crashed or may have gotten somehow did commerce with early America or in early Americans, which they didn't stay, but we know they got to it. We know China got there. We know a lot of people got to America before the Vikings got there. A lot of people got to America before the Pilgrims, before the uh, before them. Okay, it's known the Americas was people got to the Americas before the Pilgrims. Okay, there's a whole bunch of instances. It's historical. If you don't believe it, go look it up. But anyway, so the Romans. So basically, to become a citizen, you kind of had to serve or be born into it. Well, the Great Roman Empire lasted a long time, but it started falling when they started doing a few things. When they started doing what we're doing in America now with social justice, so to speak. Um, when they started giving the average people more power, is when they started falling. When they left their religion's beliefs and went from religion to philosophy, also they started to fall. When they started embracing sexuality, I'm not going and when and multiculturalism, so to speak. See, because when Rome came in, what they would do is instead of like Alexander the Great, when he came in, he would destroy all the culture of a nation and he would then indoctrinate all the people of this new nation he conquered. All their children would be indoctrinated into the Greek country, the Greek mindset. Rome, on the other hand, when they went in and assimilated a country, they would assimilate the country's knowledge and pagan beliefs and everything else into the Roman way of life. So they try to embrace multiculturalism, and the result of this eventually was the fall of the Roman Empire. But they also try to embrace pagan idolatry uh, by adding these new groups of gods to their own god pantheon of gods, which meant they got their morality from their religion, so to speak. So by adding other religions to their religion, you had to, which is kind of like America's doing, because America was founded on Christian principles, but now we're embracing all these other religions and philosophies. But to do that, we have to, for a lot of Christians are compromising on the morality of the Bible. So Romans would be compromising on the morality of the pantheon of the Roman pantheon, because to embrace the cultures, traditions, and religion of other nations, you have to, in some cases, say either that's right for you, but this is right for me, or you have to say, I agree with that more than I agree with this, which is what I get from my religion. So that's another fall. That's another one of the causes of the fall of the Roman Empire, and probably will be one of the causes of the fall of the American Empire. Another fall of the Roman Empire is you gave you gave soldiers, generals, power to be leaders of governors. Now, I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. They probably displayed great leadership qualities to be a soldier that earned their way up to generalhood anyway. But the problem was that with that is that military leaders, as opposed to civilian leaders, run things differently. Also, most military leaders that have been in combat and war their whole entire life only know that. So they're going to run stopping insurrection, stopping crime, etc., basically like they would defeating an enemy, which doesn't bode too well with the average citizen. The average citizen probably wouldn't like that mentality of thinking. So, in some cases, civilian governors probably better, and in other cases, maybe we do want military leaders. It's a balance, but without that balance, they didn't have that balance because some provinces you had complete military martial law as a rule, and others you had basically rich aristocratic people. Now, part of the fall was they gave the lower class more power. Now, I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. I'm saying that when you give the lower class more power just for the sake of giving it to them without them earning said power is a bad thing. And that is why we're giving a whole, that is why, like in America, where we have racial quotients and equity and stuff like that, is a bad thing because what we're doing is we're giving the lower classes power just because they want the power and just because we feel sorry for them instead of making them earn their way. That's why, what is it? Shoot. I don't even know the name of it, but it doesn't work. We're, equality of outcome doesn't work. Equity doesn't work. Um, Trying to promote certain people over other people based on their race or their sexual identity or their gender or whatever doesn't work because people should have to earn that rank based on equality. Um, Having less standards for having a smaller standard for one race or gender compared to another race or gender is racism and sexism and a form of discrimination because it doesn't look at people as individuals. It then looks at people from their skin color or their sexuality. So it doesn't work. We should be looking at people based off of their accomplishments, what they have proven that they can actually do, and then determine based on that if they should get paid more based on experience or and if they are worthy of said promotion. The Roman Empire started giving the lower classes basically what would be known as the right to vote at first, which then they demanded more and more. They gave them this without them having anything. Uh, Not that people shouldn't have the right to vote, but maybe maybe when our nation only had the people who own land and contributed to society as voting, maybe we had a better society. Just saying. Nowadays, you have people voting that don't have jobs. They bum off the government, and they don't have jobs. They don't work. They don't even attempt to do something to work. They claim they're disabled or whatever to come up with some kind of excuse to not work, but then they want all the benefits. They want all the benefits from the government without putting any into society. They want all the benefits of society without doing something in society. Now, another thing that was the fall of the Roman Empire was embracing sexual promiscuity. Now, I know some people are going to say they had sexual promiscuity anyway because of Diana and Aphrodite and the goddesses of sex and love and the the temple whores, the priestesses, and stuff of that nature. To a degree, I would say yes, they had that, but that was confined to a certain area, and it was basically their religion. Now, did people probably abuse it and claim they were worshiping when they were just trying to get off? Yes, they probably did. Probably used it as an excuse. But not everybody worshiped all the gods. Some people worshiped one deity more than another deity. They were all part of the pantheon of gods. So I will say, from a degree, yes, they probably did have sexual immorality. But those would be the people who worshipped those type of gods. That wouldn't have been everybody. Now, what I'm saying is when they started having open, blatant sexual immorality, it no longer became anything to do with the gods. It no longer was it had to do anything to do with worship. It now was just anybody can have sex with anybody, and they had loads of orgies. Now the rich people were having orgies, the poor people were having orgies, everybody was having orgies where they were having just wild parties. Now, part of all this happened because once after they conquered basically the known world, they stopped conquering. So, do I think that there comes a time when there should be peace? Yes. But do I think that we should ever give up manifest destiny? No. I think that the expanding of an empire should never end because once the expanding of an empire decides to stop, you then have to deal with some of these problems, social issues, which you don't have to deal with if people are dying in war all the time, or if people are sent to another conflict, another war, another war, another war. As long as you're conquering, even if that means you have to conquer the same place multiple times because you conquer it and then it decides it doesn't want to be part of your kingdom again and it rebels, then you have to send people in to conquer it again. As long as that's going on, you have the economy and the laws and everything of the society pretty much based on an empire that stays in constant conquest. Once you have long stretches of peace, you start having problems. You start having riots, you start having rebellions, you start having economic downfalls, and you start having to give the lower class more power, and then which they didn't earn. They didn't do anything to earn it. Now, if you have service guarantee and citizenship, or business owners that run businesses well getting citizenship that are actually contributing to society, like the elite aristocrats of Rome and the general soldiers of Rome and the ones who actually own lands, that that in Rome, when you have them are the only ones who are in power that can vote, they at least contributed something to society, thus earned their right to vote. But then you give it to the lowers, and they don't. Now, also, the lowers then advocated for like basically limits of how long you can keep a person a slave, which then allowed which then created less slaves, and less slaves meant more people had to work, which means the rich had to spend more money, and then less slaves. Once they got freed, they became regular citizens, which then again, of course, means more people voting, more people activating, being active, and in some cases, less people. And the more people that there are to vote, and the less people are actually active in the thing. But you have to have more of a, you have to allow more land so they can have homes. It's just, yeah, it's a lot of stuff. And if you have people that don't want to work and have disabilities or whatever, or they claim that they don't want to work, you didn't have to cater to those people, which creates higher taxes. War does not necessarily create higher taxes. Because when you conquer people, you're supposed to take their stuff. Okay? So when you take their stuff, you're actually making a profit. War is a racket in the sense that historically, war has always been about taking other people's stuff. You take their lands, you take their people to make into slaves, you take their whatever. Now, modern day warfare is not exactly the same, but historically, in ancient times, war was basically, simply put, expand our empire, take their stuff. The army got part of it, and the government got the other part of it. It was a form of taxation. Now we have another form of taxation, and it's basically the police department as revenue agents. They, if you commit crimes, they tax you for the crimes. So the idea of a war on drugs is basically the idea of, we're going to attack, since we can't make any money off of them, we're going to have a war on them. I mean, seriously, a lot of drugs don't even harm. But there are drugs that there's not a war on, and those are the drugs that are in Walgreens and Rite Aid and stuff. Those are the drugs that the government pushes. They're FDA approved. They have a high cost on them. But you know what kind of drugs are never put on those? Herbal remedies. Those are always called supplements. Herbal this, herbal that. If it's natural ingredients, then of course it's never going to be FDA approved. So the government gets to control which drugs are legal and which drugs are not legal. Now, I'm saying there are drugs. There is even legal drugs like opioids, for example, that have been actually proven to be bad. And there are drugs like cocaine, for example, that are illegal drugs that are bad. But the point is, the main reason for their war on drugs is because they can't make money off of the drugs that are illegal. That's why they're illegal. Think about it. If the government could make money off of the stuff that was illegal, would it be illegal? Government only decides to illegalize something. They can't make money off of it, or they can't control it, or they're scared of it. Now, this is the same reason why the Roman Empire failed. They were scared of their own people. They kept giving power to this people, and then the people kept wanting more power. They had blatant, open LGBTQ stuff, sexual immorality. They fell from their religion and their morality. They went to philosophy. They embraced all kinds of other religions. That's part of why they failed. They didn't stay in a constant conquest mode. They finally decided, we're good, we've conquered enough, we're going to be at peace. And then they dealt with, while in peacetime, they still dealt with their citizens like it was wartime. They started creating a culture of business. But the rich and powerful never wanted to get completely out. Instead of, they switched from being in control politics wise to being in control business wise. So to keep the economy growing, the Romans had to embrace a thing called, they had to embrace business. They had to embrace capitalism. They had to embrace trade. They had to embrace building roads. So they started building roads during times of peace, which then linked more people together. Which, when you link more people together, you have a problem with freedom of speech, basically. Not that I'm against freedom of speech. I love freedom of speech myself. But it's harder to control people when they have freedoms. So the fall of the Roman Empire basically is partially their own fault. They gave people too much freedoms, which made them fall. But I don't think that's the main reason for them to fall. I think the main reason for them to fall was the rich and powerful never wanted to give up their power. I think part of the reason that they fell wasn't the fact that they gave people more freedoms, but they didn't let people earn their freedoms. They gave people freedoms. All people need the freedoms. But they didn't respect the people's freedoms that they gave them, and they didn't make people earn the freedoms that they gave them. They then embraced immorality, open, blatant sexual immorality. That is the main reason I think the Roman Empire fell, is the simple fact that they openly embraced sexual immorality. It's one thing to own a slave as an individual. It's one thing to own a slave as an individual, specifically for her to be your whore, basically. And it's another thing. They also openly embraced straight up murder. They arrested people, sometimes without even any charges, and threw them into coliseums to fight. This Everybody's watching these. They're gambling on them and all this stuff, and they're literally watching people kill each other. They persecuted the Christians. One of the ways they persecuted the Christians, the early Christians, was by throwing them in the Colosseum. Their only crime was being a Christian, was believing in a monotheistic religion. It was basically their only crime. As literally was their only crime. They persecuted all kinds of other folks. Eventually, of course, Rome fell. Rome wasn't built in a day, and it didn't fall in a day either. But the idea that they openly embraced immorality such as murder and immorality such as sexual immorality is my main two thoughts of why the Roman Empire fell. Now, the things we watch on television, and the things we see in real life, and the things we read in books and games, video games, board games, action figures, toys, comics, etc. A lot of it glorifies violence and sexuality. A lot of it has that in there. I mean, there are lots of shows that have sex scenes, and the sex scenes are not between they're premarital sex. Let's put it that way. They're not between husband and wife, and in many a case, you could probably did without having that sex scene at all. Do we really need all the sexuality in movies? Do we really need all the violence in some of the movies? Some movies are straight up, specifically just a fun popcorn movie, which is just straight up fun action to watch. Don't get me wrong, I like these fun action to watch movies. But it pretty much embraces violence. Not that I'm not going to say that that's a good thing or a bad thing, as I believe people are and should be personally responsible for their own actions. If you watch that movie that embraces violence, does that mean you should go out and commit the same violence? No. Okay, so my belief personally is that when you openly embrace these things, the human psyche gets more immune to it, and it starts becoming normal. It's normalized. It's not that, and if you don't have personal responsibility for people's actions, then the normalized becomes bad. So the Roman Empire is great. They actually like loads of things, even our modern calendar. There's so many different things that exist, all because of the Roman Empire that we still use to this day, all over the world. So the Romans did all kinds of great stuff, but they failed when they got rid of their founding beliefs. Their founding beliefs of morality, religion, religion. Their founding beliefs who of people earning their way in life, of earning a, a living, of earning that stuff, and sexual immorality. Anyway, remember, God is good all the time. All the time, God is good. Keep on gaming. Like, comment, subscribe, share. Jesus loves you. Jesus God. Jesus Lord. Jesus King. Jesus is ruler. Everything. And comment down below some of your things you like about Rome. And if you don't believe or think all my stuff is historically correct, probably did jump here and there from historical time periods of ancient Rome, since it did exist for a pretty long period of time. I couldn't historically be going. I decided not to do this from a straight up historical start to finish perspective. I just jumped around here and there.